I don't know if Rachel's watching right now. I hope she is, because I want to address Rachel directly.
Now, according to reports, the government will abandon its plans to freeze some disability benefits, are a backlash from several, usually loyal Labour MPs. Ministers are looking to cut billions of pounds from the welfare budget, and it had been suggested that personal independence payments, those PIPs you keep hearing about, would not rise in line with inflation for a year as part of those plans. But the policy will now likely be scrapped to avoid a potentially large rebellion in the House of Commons. Let's get my thoughts now from the former Labour spokesman, James Mathewson. James, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. James, this is basically a huge U-turn, isn't it?
It is, and it's the kind of U-turn that we like to see, Dawn, because at times in politics, there needs to be U-turns. And I think people often force themselves into positions where they feel they can't U-turn on things because they would be embarrassed or there'd be some kind of stigma in doing so. Changing our minds is an important part of the human condition overall, isn't it? But of course, in politics and in leadership, it's vital, because if you are just sticking to an idea or a principle or whatever it be, just for the sake of it and for the sake of saving face, that can be hugely damaging, of course, for the Labour Party, not just electorally, but just on its principles. It was vitally important that they looked again at this. And I think there's still questions to be asked about their positions on welfare. I don't think they're out of the woods just yet, but it is very reassuring for me as somebody who supports the Labour Party to see its the effect of its memberships on its MPs, on its backbench and then on the front bench, working quite nicely.
James, but I mean, something has to be done. I mean, the welfare bill has increased by 20 billion since the pandemic, predicted to hit 75 billion by 2030. So something does have to be done with it. So surely this was the right decision to look at this area and look at making some cuts.
Certainly looking at it and looking at what efficiencies can be made. Understandably, totally get that. However, it's about the language, it's about the direction and about priorities, because there are choices in politics, okay? And if you make the choice when it comes down to it that the Conservative Party would make, because that's their kind of model of operation, that, you know, a smaller state, a smaller welfare state, then what's the difference between you and the Conservative Party in power? And people ask that question, and more than ever right now, with Reform biting at the heels, or previously biting at the heels when they weren't biting each other, of those mainstream parties, people need to be asking the question, what's the difference between the two mainstream parties? Is there a difference? And crucially for the Labour Party, there should be. There should be a priority, and it should be going after those with more than those with less as a priority.
James, when you say it's about the language, what do you mean? I mean, if they'd addressed it up in more cuddly-wuddly language, would that have made any difference?
No, it's more like I say, because where you say your priorities lie, and some of the rhetoric that we've heard from some ministers, they've backed out on it now, but some of the rhetoric was very similar to the language that we heard during the era of austerity from the likes of George Osborne, and David Cameron. So when you hear that from somebody, and if you vote for the Labour Party, you vote normally because your principles align with that party, and you know what those principles are. They're principles of a functioning state, of a welfare state existing, of supporting those who have less, and that's just kind of the ethos of the Labour Party and Labour politics. To hear Labour ministers kind of just repeating rhetoric about welfare that you would expect to hear from those on the right, which, is fair enough, that's their belief. But to hear that from Labour ministers, very concerning. It just shows that they can be easily influenced by pressures, whether it be electoral pressures or pressures in the House of Commons itself.
The problem is, I mean, that Labour, after obviously the horrors of, the Tory infighting, wanted to present a united front. This isn't doing it, is it? I mean, this is obviously, there are already problems within the cabinet.
Oh, exactly, yeah. It's not the look they would have wanted at all. I mean, this conversation should be had behind closed doors. And I know, look, here's the thing. Keir Starmer could have pushed this through if he wanted to. He didn't need to. No matter how big this rebellion would have been, he has enough loyalists to get whatever he wants through.
Of course.
And I don't think it would have affected it hugely. Would have been a little bit embarrassing, certainly, and there might have been some resignations from Cabinet, but he could have got it through. But he's looked at it again, and he's clearly heard the pleas from his backbenchers and from some ministers in Cabinet who've said, I don't want to do this. This isn't a good look. This isn't for me. And these people have already, had to bite their tongue when it comes to cuts to winter fuel allowance, to some reversing on welfare benefits already. That's not what you get elected for as a Labour MP. It's not what drives them or motivates them. So, of course, their morale's going to be low. So I think this is a moment for Keir Starmer to look around and say, I need to give something back here. I need to realise why these people are here and why they're forming a government and supporting me.
Just very quickly, James, it's very interesting they're doing a reverse ferret, as we used to say in the print business, on this one, because people on benefits are more likely to vote for Labour. We know that. But they haven't done anything like that on the winter fuel payments for pensioners and on the farmers, the inheritance tax. They're sticking to their guns on that one because those groups aren't likely to vote Labour, are they? Isn't that the bottom line here?
I don't know. I mean, the pensioners I would disagree with. I think they should have U-turned on that. I think there was an opportunity to, and I think they should have. I think that was a whole mess, and I think, to be honest, that they've learned a lesson from that clearly, as it shows with this, because the way that was announced, the way it was done ahead of the budget, the way the amount of attention was given to it, that was a real mess, and it was a mess that the current, chief of staff is laying at the feet of the former chief of staff of Keir Starmer. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. But at the same time, I think, when we look at the whole picture overall, you have to remember that these choices that the government makes, yes, they have to be practical, yes, they have to be pragmatic, but they've also got to be in line with your party principles, because we have more and more people coming of age to vote every year, and they look at our political system currently, and they go, well, what's the difference between those two parties? And if there is no difference, and I know the likes of people who support reform will like this, it's in their benefit, but those of us who don't want to see extreme politics come to the table as a genuine option need to realise that there still needs to be differences between those mainstream parties.
Yeah. All right, James, thank you very much for that one. That is former Labour spokesman James Matthewson, and Reform obviously would dispute the fact they are extreme. They're just not Labour. Thank you very much for joining us, James. OK, now let's see what my panel make of this. I have former Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Ben Habib, talking of which, and founder of Turn Left Media, Curtis Daly. I'm going to come to you first on this one, Ben. This is not a good look for the government straight away. What, it's 7 months, and this is a major U-turn.
Yeah, and it's actually a U-turn on an issue where they needed to grapple it and get on with it. But, we tend to talk about, just on the substance of the issue as opposed to the political U-turn, we tend to talk about benefits in isolation, we talk about work and employment in isolation. But of course, they're two sides of the same coin. And one of the reasons the government is having to look at cutting benefits is because it's damaged the labour market so dramatically since it got into office. It was already very badly damaged under the Conservative Party. There were 6-odd million people surviving on universal credit in this country at the end of the Conservative government. There are now 7 million people in this country.
We're the worst performing country in the G7, aren't we, for getting people back into work after the pandemic?
It's absolutely awful. And 3 million of those 7 million aren't even looking for a job because they're claiming mental health issues and they're getting full benefits as a result. But what did Rachel Reeves do when she got into office? Instead of trying to make it pay to work, which, by the way, is a double benefit for the government because you take people off benefits and you bring them into employment, so they're paying tax. You cut your costs and you increase your revenue. Making people work is a fantastic policy. But
also better for your mental health.
And better for your mental health and everything, your pride, your family, your standing in society, etc. But what she did was raise employers' national insurance, which was a tax on the working people. So she's actually pushed more people towards the benefits net. And then you get into this downward spiral, which is where we're at, Dawn, where the government then goes, oh, my goodness, we're not getting the tax take that we need. We better cut costs. And so you end up in a spiral where government's cutting costs, which I think, by the way, is the right thing to do anyway. But they're cutting costs, income is reducing, and the economy is going down the pan. And we've had 28 years of this kind of governance, where you've got state intervention, large taxation, large regulation, bearing down on the working class, making it more and more difficult to keep the hard-earned pounds that you've earned, keeping them in your pocket. And we've got to have a sea change of attitude to government. We've got to reinstill aspiration, and that comes from making it pay to work and getting people proud of that benefits bill, like you say, proud to go back to work, proud to provide for their families and have ambition in life. So everyone gets up in the morning and wants to go to work. That's the message.
Like us, Ben.
Like us, yeah.
Yes, OK, like us, definitely like us, Dawn. Right, Curtis, this to me sounds like that Keir Starmer has been bullied into doing this by members of his own cabinet.
No, I don't think he's bullied. I think what Ben said, the complete opposite is true. I first want to say that James, who had on earlier, he said about politics is about choices. I agree, it's about choices. And it's not 27 years, it's 45 years of the same policies, which is going after benefit claimants, going after the disabled. It's always about going after the most vulnerable and poorest in society. We never decide to go after the corporations who don't pay taxes. We always go after the poorest. And the Labour Party say, well, you voted for us for change. There is no change. They are the Conservatives. They have no principles. I don't know if Rachel is watching right now. I hope she is, because I want to address Rachel directly. I think what you're proposing is absolutely disgusting. It's sickening. 330,000 people were killed due to George Osborne's austerity, and you're continuing the same line. I'm telling you this right now. If you continue this, it's very possible that people will die. Now, do you want a vibrant economy? Of course you do. How do you do that? Well, you first need good quality paying jobs to get people off of benefits. That's something that I would agree with Ben on. But at the same time, you can't expect weakening unions, the fact that bosses can pay people whatever they want. There's precarious work, but it's not just
improving workers' rights. And by the way, George Osborne,
they're watering down workers' rights. But at the moment, we have a situation where union density is at its lowest point. The corporations and the billionaire class are as rich as they've ever been. And then for a government to turn and say, yeah, do you know what we're going to do is we're going to cut benefits. Personal independent payments, which was assessed that there was a 0% fraud rate. The media, and I'm going to include GBNews on this, but the Daily Mail, all these corporate media want to talk about the very poorest in society. We're not attacking the real problems. It is the large corporations. And by the way, here's a fact that people might not know. The Labour Party were given millions of pounds from these people. So, of course, Rachel Reeves is going to say, what we're going to do, we're just going to cut benefits. Go after the people that is destroying this country. I want a patriotic economy where these people pay their taxes to have world-class public services instead of going after the very poorest. And by the way, that won't make the economy better because there's an issue where most people don't have any money. There's something called the velocity of money. And what that means is if people get into work but they're low-paid jobs, people can't spend money into the economy. The problem is inequality from the very richest. I'm not talking about like people have done well. I'm talking about the billionaire class who got away with everything. And the Labour Party are doing the exact same thing as the Conservatives and blaming the very poorest.
They are run by a millionaire and Keir Starmer at the moment.
That's probably part of it as well.
Are you seriously saying that the welfare bill that's due to hit 75 billion by 2030, which is only 5 years' time, you wouldn't even look at that? If you were in government, would you look at that? Would you think, right, no, that's fine, everybody on benefits is fine?
Majority of benefits on pensions, by the way. And remember the backlash, which I agree with, by the way. The decision to freeze the pension payments was disgusting, absolutely disgusting. And there was backlash from that, right? But that is where most of the welfare bill... Yeah, fair enough, I agree. That's where the majority of the welfare bill goes. And Ben was right when he says we need to look at this holistically, not just look at one thing. The entirety of the welfare bill is actually, when it comes to unemployment and disability benefits, is actually a minuscule thing. So even if the Labour Party do go after these people, it won't make a dent in the economy. But they just want to signal to people that we are tough and strong. But we're still going to have a stagnant economy. That's why the economy has regressed by 0.1% because
Ben, come in on this one. Ben, would you like to say anything?
Well, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Curtis.
Yeah.
I think that the large corporations are in bed both with the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. I think there is a move globally for multinationals to be in bed with governments, which is a very unhealthy situation for any democracy. I agree also that the welfare bill is a small part of the overall benefits bill. But what we've got to do is make sure that we have a vibrant economy. That's critical. If you have a vibrant economy, as I said, you have less people forced into benefits because they can get jobs, and most people do want to work. I believe that. They can get jobs which are remunerative, they can save money, they can have aspiration, their children can go to better schools, etc., etc., etc. And you reduce the benefits bill. At the moment, we're in a downward spiral. Because of the policies adopted by successive governments, we're in a downward spiral, and it's going to be very
Remember,
difficult
this
to get
isn't
out of it.
about unemployment, it's like disability benefits. It's a very different thing.
I know, but it's part of the same thing. Part of the overall, okay.
If you don't, I'm going to be on unemployment benefit. You don't both shut up now, to be honest with you. I better have a job, which I love, by the way. But what do you think? You've heard very strong opinions from both of my panellists here. What do you think? gbnews.com/your say. And for all the best analysis and opinion on that story and much more, just go to our website, which is gbnews.com. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News.